Before we get stuck into this video, I'd just like to thank everyone for taking part in the Fujifilm cap giveaway, and congratulations to Rick Coleman from San Antonio in the States. Enjoy the cap, Rick. And I'd just like to apologize in advance. I had to get the lens back pretty quickly, so I did the recording part of me speaking in my office, and there was bad fluctuating light as the sun was going down. So again, apologies in advance, not the best lighting. And lastly, the fantastic news is that Fujifilm South Africa has received a copy of the X Pro 3, and they are sending it to me. So I'm hoping in the next few days, if not the weekend or Monday, I'll be getting my hands on it and putting it through its paces to do a review for you. So if you're keen on seeing that, please do subscribe and hit that notification button. So when I do post the review, you'll be first to see it. I was very excited when I found out that Fujifilm is going to be releasing a new lens for the GFX system. Now in the GFX lineup, the 50R is my favorite camera. I just like the way it's designed. I like the layout of the camera. It suits the way I shoot. It's small, it's compact, it travels really well. So yeah, it was quite exciting to find out that they were introducing a really small lens. It's not the fastest lens, it's a 3.5 aperture, but size is very important to me. And an interesting focal length as well. I mean, Fujifilm already has the 63 2.8 and the 45mm 2.8, and this sits in between those two lenses. 50mm is a very interesting focal length that they've chosen. In 35mm terms, it's a 40mm field of view. Even though it's not quite exactly, it doesn't work the same way as the 3:2 ratio, which you find on 35mm. It is a 4:3 ratio on the GFX system. So it does give you an interesting field of view, for sure. I took this out on a shoot to test it. I see this lens as being a great street photographer's lens, combined with the 50R being a very compact medium format option. But I took it out on a brief portrait shoot, and thanks to Gina who stepped in to help me. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, I just did 2 locations, nothing major. But the point of the shoot was I didn't take any other lenses. I had to do the whole shoot at a 40mm field of view, or 50mm on the GFX system. It must be said though, if I was going on a shoot and I only could use one lens, only allowed to use one lens, I definitely would be picking either a 35, a 40, or a 50mm field of view equivalents on a 35mm system. So it wasn't too difficult because it does give you that width, so you can step back and get sort of wide landscape type shots. But I was really impressed. I was really happy with the way the lens performed. It's actually quite a fast focusing lens. I was really impressed. I think it's a little bit quicker than the other two in the same grouping, which is a 63 or the 45. One of the drawbacks of the lens is, even though the lens has a 50mm focal length and is very versatile, you can cover the wides, getting nice and close, is that you can't go too close to your subject. You can only go 55 centimeters from the film plane, which it's not bad. It's just, you're obviously trying to get close. You're trying to fill the frame with the subject. You're trying to create as much out of focus as you can to isolate sort of in those close portraits. And 55 is not bad. It would be nice a bit closer, but I think the size of the lens does come into play here. You're wanting a compact lens, and these are the drawbacks that come with a compact lens. The aperture range on this lens is 3.5 to f32. I didn't do any shots at f32. I did sort of up to the f16, f22 mark. So what I did find on this lens, I didn't do any hectic scientific tests. I didn't compare it to any other lens either in the shoot like I did on the 1680, which is the last review I did. But what I did notice when I took it into post is that the lens does very well wide open. So it's a very sharp lens at 3.5, and you'll find that you can shoot all the time in 3.5 at different distances from the subject. When you stop down, the image got a bit better, a bit sharp around f8, f11, and then it got a little bit weaker actually at the f22, f16, f22 mark. Generally speaking, with lenses, that if a lens performs really well wide open, there's going to be a drawback somewhere, and that often happens on the sort of closing the aperture down, the sort of f16, f22, f32 mark. And obviously with the shoot that I didn't really get to test corners, just because it's not something you notice when you're doing portraits. It's because you've got the subject in the middle, and you're often shooting wide open and things like that. In many ways, because they've chosen the really small compact lens, that's not a fast lens, it's a 3.5 to keep the size down. This, in a way, this combination almost becomes the GF's version of a X100, which was the first X series camera that came out. You know, the built-in 35mm equivalent lens, I think it's the 23. That's like a cult, that has a cult following, that camera. It really has done well. Those people who just head out with one focal range, one focal length, it's built onto the camera, you can't change it. And I've seen amazing results of that camera. I never use it because I've always, in my work, I use interchangeable lenses. So it was very important for me when the X Pro 1 and the XT 1 came out that I went that route. I know there are many of you who've bought into the GFX system, the 50R, maybe even the 50S. I prefer the 50R, not that the 50S is a bad camera. I actually did a review on that, which I'll link at the end of this video. But, not many people can get it and also then buy a series of lenses. So a lot of people that I've spoken to in the GFX range would go for 23, 63, 110 or 120 or whatever it is, and those are the three lenses they use. Some would go 23, 32 to 64 zoom, 110 or 120, and then some who would go for even the longer focal length, which is the 250. Then there's those who go 23, 45, 63, 110. They have four lenses, and then the costs start coming in. Gets a bit difficult. So those of you interested in getting into the GFX lineup, and particularly interested in this 50R, which is a beautiful camera to use, it really is such a joy. It's worth looking at this lens and only this lens, and then just treat it as though it's like an X100. Just get out in the street and shoot. Move your feet. You can actually create some beautiful imagery with this lens, and let that be the start of getting yourself into the system, into medium format. And then when you can afford to, maybe throw in the 110. If you want to do those portraits, or maybe even a wide, or whatever it might be. But certainly a lens to consider, especially if you're looking into getting one lens to kind of cover that sort of standard sort of area between 35 and 50mm in 35mm field of view equivalents. A couple of things aesthetically I didn't like about the lens. I don't like the lens hood that comes with the camera. I'm not a massive fan of lens hoods that screw onto the filter thread, because if you're going to put a filter on and you want to interchange with filter, not saying that this is the type of lens you're going to do a lot of filter changing on, because I'm not sure if this is your first point of call for landscape shooters, but yeah, I would prefer to actually have a connection around just beyond the focus ring, where a lens hood connects into that. Now, I'm also not sure, because I did all my shooting with this lens hood on, so I'm not sure if it's the type of lens and the way it handles flare, light coming into the lens. I actually pushed it really hard. I deliberately shot, as you'll see in the images, pretty much straight into the sun at times. I really wanted to see how this handled flare, because I know that these sort of, not pancake lenses, but these sort of really compact lenses, sometimes that's where these lenses are weak. They give you so much for being so light and compact, but I really wanted to push it to see where its weakness was. So I'm not sure this design, which is actually interesting, it really, it obviously just covers the field, the angle of view. Now, if I really was to be like picky over the design on this, especially those who pride themselves in their Fuji cameras and want to go for a leather strap or something to customize the camera and make it look really good. I mean, in my work, I don't get time to do that stuff. I'm just shooting. It's my cameras are tools to me. But I know a lot of people, they look at these cameras as sort of art pieces, and it's sort of a part of them, and the whole thing. So I would have preferred those old school square lens hoods that connected to the outer end of the focus ring. So sat well beyond, so it didn't make the lens, that much longer off the body, pretty much the same length. Just a nice little square lens hood on the end, and maybe even inside that lens hood, taper it up close to the actual glass to stop any flare that comes in. I think, you know, putting the camera down and things like that, it would be on the lens hood, not on the front element, because it really is like a pyramid shape. It tapers in, and it means that quite often the camera is going to be leaning on that front glass element there. Those of you who do manual focusing, the actual focus ring is very interesting. It's got quite a pronounced grip on it, and it's very different to all the other Fuji lenses. It's almost like a follow focus on cinema cameras. I don't know if any of you guys have used a follow focus before. It's got really deep imprinted grooves, almost like gearing, and it feels great. And because the lens tapers off at the end, it actually is quite comfortable to do manual focusing. I think any thicker would have been a bit difficult, and because it's quite compact against the body, you know, your hand on a square body like the 50R, changing aperture is not the most comfortable compared to lenses that are a bit longer. But I think this helps a lot with the manual focus on this, and I can understand why it kind of tapered off from that point onwards. So interesting that it's very different to the other lenses that I've seen. Nice, smooth, solid adjustments on the aperture, the same as usual. And yeah, good combination of plastic and metal components, keeping that weight down. You know, medium format camera with a standard sort of focal length lens weighing in at a kilogram, 1,100 grams, is phenomenal. It's as light as it gets, really. So very impressed that they managed to do this, and I'm glad they have, because I do think there's a market for this lens. I do think there are those people who don't fuss about multiple focal lengths, shoot the world as they see it with the focal length that they've got, and this is going to give you exceptional quality. You're not too fussed about ridiculously shallow depth of field. 3.5, you know, those would argue it'd be nice if it was a bit wider, but then again, the lens is going to be bigger. So, and obviously being a larger sensor, it performs better with its signal to noise ratio, where you would normally maybe only shoot up to 1600 ISO or 32 on the X series body, the APS-C body. Here you can, like, there were a couple of times where I didn't even realize it. There were a couple of times when I wasn't using my flash, and I landed up shooting natural light. That because I was running the auto ISO feature and just doing aperture priority on the body, a couple of times in the evening it slipped up to 5,000, 6,400 ISO, and when I got back and had a look, they're really good. So you can really shoot at sort of high ISOs, and be quite confident that you get most things covered with this lens being a 3.5 aperture. Would I be excited to use this lens? I actually think I would. It's tough for me because there's a whole nother photography world of gear that I'd love to tap into, that's for me, for my personal work. But to invest so much money like I have into gear for my professional work, it's not always easy to have a separate system. So, whatever I use professionally, when I go out and shoot for myself, I use the same gear. So when I choose something for myself, is it practical in my work situation? So this lens is, I'm not quite sure if it's practical for my professional work because of the focal lengths I already have. But yeah, if you had to say to me, you've got a GFX50R, you can only have one lens, I'd be more than happy with this lens. So feel free to comment in below. I'll try my best to get back to everyone who does ask a question. I really appreciate the overwhelming response I got on the last video. The 1680 video got so much more views than I thought it was going to get, and I think partly because the lens is quite a sought after lens. So I really got fantastic feedback, and I really do appreciate it, and I'm glad I could help people and show people the difference between the 1680 and the primes, and I'll also leave the link at the end of the video if you haven't seen that video. It was quite interesting though, because it's the first time I've been drawn out of YouTube to go look at other things that my video has been attached to and shared on. And there were a couple of websites that shared my video as a response to the new release of this lens. And then obviously you read the comments there. And understandably, and because I'm a Fuji X photographer, it's a concern from a bias perspective. So just to put this out there while I'm reviewing a lens, do I have bias for Fujifilm? I do. I like the camera. It's the camera I use. So I have a bias of some kind. That's the system that I use. So when I review things, I tend to look at Fujifilm positively, and I can't really change that. But am I going to be deliberately, am I going to lie to anyone or not be honest about something No, I won't. I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm not going to deliberately give you information that would lead you to purchase something that was incorrect. That's not my goal and my gain at all. So I have mentioned before, if I think it's an inferior product or I don't like it, obviously because of my relationship with Fujifilm, I'm not going to go out there and slander the product or the brand. Obviously, I just will not review that product. So if I do end up reviewing something, it's because I think it's worthy of reviewing or it's an interesting thing. But none of my reviews will show it being a perfect anything, because there is no such thing as a perfect anything. So when you do watch my videos, bear in mind that I am a Fujifilm X photographer. I do have a level of bias. I try to be as honest as possible. I will mention things that I dislike, that are weak. But if I'm doing a review, it's something that I generally do like. And my goal is to help you make a decision. Also, just so people understand how it works as a Fuji X photographer, I'm not paid at all, okay? When Fujifilm X series came out, I was very interested in the X Pro 1. I was the first person, as far as I know, in the country to purchase one, and I purchased it through Fujifilm South Africa. And I showed a lot of interest in it. And I was using a different brand at the time, and I used that as a second camera. I could never transition over until certain issues with that camera were sorted out, because it was early days. And the release of the X-T1 allowed me then to make that switch. At that stage, a person within Fujifilm South Africa knew that I was using it, and there wasn't anyone else using this, making that big step, bold step to go into a mirrorless, a smaller, going from a 35mm sensor down to a APS, and like, what are you doing? Like, I would arrive at weddings and jobs that I was doing. People are looking at me going, what the hell have you got in your hand? Can that thing do the job? And because I was really early days in this, mirrorless hadn't really, and I think Fujifilm appreciated it. Here's a person who actually likes the product, because I never approached them. They said, okay, here's a professional shooter. I was well known within certain photographic circles, not overall. And they said, well, if he's using it, let's get behind him and team up. And the way it works is if there's a speaking engagement at an expo or a get-together, they call me in and I do a little talk for them. I'll maybe even do a tutorial, whatever it might be. If I ever have a problem where I need to get a particular camera in or a lens in, or even a lens that I don't own but I need just for a few days, they give me that privilege of using that equipment. But everything I have in my bag, I bought, I paid for. I will tell you though, in my relationship with Fuji, I've been given one item. It was the X-T2. And that's because I was chosen by Fujifilm Japan to be part of the launch of the X-T2. So I was part of the process. It was a lot of work. Sending back, they reviewed the images, they communicated. And in the end, as being part of the launch and giving them vital information, I was given an X-T2 as a gift with my initials on the bottom of the camera. So I just want to let you know, going forward, that's who I am. I'm not going to pretend that I'm something else and behave this way, but I'm actually doing that. So please bear that in mind. And those comments saying, listen, well, he's a Fuji X photographer, take it with a pinch of salt. You're absolutely right. Take it with a pinch of salt. I have my internal biases. But at the same time, the person writing the comment might be a different brand shooter and have their own biases. So I think that's why our last review did quite well, because I actually showed you the Prime against the 1680. And I told you where it was weaker than the Prime, but people were like, well, it actually did very well against the Prime. And that's why it was positive. So I didn't misinform. So that's not my intention. So yeah, so just a couple of myths around X photographers. We're not some paid, sponsored, I don't get taken on holidays. If something happens and Fujifilm needed me to be somewhere, they pay for me to be there, but I don't get paid for anything else. It benefits me to be known as an ambassador as much as it benefits them to know that, well, someone in the community who's well respected, who works hard, uses our product, and that can be our spokesman. And there's a group of us in South Africa. It's not just me, there's quite a few of us in different genres. I'm portrait, from weddings through to corporate and events, and mainly portraiture. So yeah, that's who I am. Just so you know, when it comes to reviewing of gear, that's my intention. So thank you, Fujifilm, for sending me this lens. Thank you. Thank you again. Like, the more positive, like, I don't have to do these reviews. That's not part of my deal with Fujifilm. I'm doing it for myself. But nevertheless, the more positive they see I'm being received, the subscribers and the views and the likes, I get gear early, the earlier I get the gear, the earlier you know about the gear, and I'll do my best always to give you the best possible review in the limited time that I have. But thanks so much, guys. If you like this video, please like it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit the bell icon. You know the usual. I have to repeat. I'm starting to use my hands now. I was told, like in YouTube videos, use your hands. That apparently gets you likes and subscribers. And yeah, what's up? Yeah. So thanks so much. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your time, and yeah, God bless.